Thank you, Robert, and hi, everybody. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people of this land, whose elders past and present were on this land. So a little bit of my background. My father actually runs a wholesale plant nursery out of Brisbane. So I spent a lot of my school holidays and my university holidays doing weeding and all the really hard stuff in the nursery. So I have a real passion for the nursery industry itself. I worked in the Australian Horticultural Corporation for a number of years, but then I became really interested in kind of an ecological perspective, and for the last 16 years I've been in policy and advocacy in the environment movement. I worked for 5 years in Greenpeace, 10 years in the Australian Conservation Foundation as a Sustainable Cities and Climate Change campaigner, and now I'm working at WWF. But I'm here in my personal capacity because I really believe that this is a fabulous initiative. And I guess, what connects us is a passion for the environment and a passion for gardens and the importance of getting people, particularly our children and young people who are living in urban environments, getting out more into nature. There's a syndrome called the nature deficit disorder now, and by getting more green space in, we are going to be able to help young people to connect to that. So that's part of the reason why I'm very motivated to be a 2020 advocate. So I guess things that you already know, we're seeing a radical shift, and the majority of people globally are now living in cities. I think a couple of years ago we hit the over 50% mark, and in Australia more than 40% of our population live in our largest two cities, Melbourne and Sydney. And of course there are pressures on house prices, competition occurring in our urban and peri-urban areas for land, the densification of our cities, the loss of agricultural land and loss of green space as we have housing encroach on them. So I guess tonight what I'd like to look at are the benefits of green spaces and green infrastructure: sustainability, livability and productivity. So sustainability, it's really about valuing green spaces for their intrinsic value as well as their functionality. It's about biodiversity and connectedness to nature. And of course, when we properly manage our natural systems and our green infrastructure, it can make a substantial contribution to both the sustainability and the livability of our cities. Something like 6% of addresses in our capital cities are within 100 metres of our bushland, which of course means they're also vulnerable to bushfires, but it also means that we can have that kind of connectivity to our bushes and our urban green landscape. However, biodiversity conservation is threatened. We are seeing more clearing of land, and definitely through urban encroachment. And as we see that clearing of land, we see that people are also losing their connection to these areas. A personal story of my work when I was working at ACF, we did some work in the Werribee Plains area. And if you know the Werribee Plains area in the western part of Melbourne, there is substantial grasslands, and the grasslands are volcanic grasslands that have around them the Ramsar listed wetlands. So these are migratory birds that come from Russia and Asia, and they fly all the way over to Australia and they do their breeding there and then they go back. And these are where we live in our cities. We also have these magnificent and substantial Ramsar wetlands and many of the biodiversity hotspots that we see, and that these are the areas where humans and nature are colliding. So it's very important, when people are moving to these outer urban areas, sometimes they don't actually understand the nature and the history of these urban areas, and so many people would think, well, why don't we just open up these grasslands to be dog runs for people? But they don't actually appreciate that there's an intrinsic value there and it has to house the biodiversity of our land. And I guess, as was discussed at the AGM, cities continue to place biodiversity pressure on our urban waterways, our estuarine environments, and that we need to find ways to feed ourselves. And something like 40% of our food has traditionally come from those peri-urban environments around the outskirts of our cities, but that's starting to diminish, and of course that's resulting in people putting their own community gardens in place and getting involved in local gardening communities. So I guess from a sustainability point of view, it's important that we value green spaces for their intrinsic value. What about livability? How we feel? What does it do to us as humans? The evidence is very high that there are psychological and health benefits of connecting with nature, reducing stress, mental restoration, increased longevity and long-term health. And of course, one of the other areas that's substantially important, particularly with increasing temperatures in our urban areas through land clearing, through climate change and through the building of more concrete, are urban heat islands. And as we see, in Melbourne, the thermal map observations collected by the City of Melbourne are showing that just a 10% increase in urban green cover could reduce daytime surface temperatures during heat waves in Melbourne City itself by about 1 degree Celsius. And if you go onto the City of Sydney website, they have some thermal heat maps as well, and you can see that if we did something very similar, just increase the green space in the City of Sydney by 10%, that we could reduce temperature during heat waves by something up to 2 degrees Celsius. So planting shade trees is fundamentally important to our health for many reasons and for the livability of our cities. I guess the third aspect to green space are the economic benefits or the productivity benefits. Green roof gardens. We see the trend in places like Paris and Chicago where green roof gardens are becoming very, very popular. They can not only store significant amounts of water and run as ecosystem services, cleaning and filtering our waters, but they also provide additional insulation. They can reduce building energy consumption, and as a result they save money in the hip pocket. And of course, shade from trees has many substantial economic benefits as well, not just reducing the heat stress that I talked about before, but they also remove pollution from the atmosphere. And if we have people who are happier, healthier, not suffering from heat stress, we reduce the bill on our overall health system. So I think if one looks around, local, state and territory governments are moving to better manage the natural and urban systems, to address some of these issues like urban heat islands, cleaning our waterways, more sustainable buildings. If you go to Broadway, you see, Sexecu building, they've got the vertical green walls there. That's a fabulous example of some innovative green space, green thinking right in the heart of our urban area. And I guess, the initiative that we're seeing with the 2020 is to engage more with the local and state governments to recognise not just the economic value, also the sustainability and livability values of our green spaces. So, in conclusion, I think one of the things that I learnt in my time as a Sustainable Cities campaigner was the importance of urban planning and integrated design thinking, and planners and governments have a fundamental role to play in ensuring that we can address some of these issues by, for example, identifying priority neighbourhoods where cities need the most cooling, integrating water-sensitive urban design, by planting more green space, identifying priority streets for temperature reduction, and ensuring that we do value green infrastructure in each location and give it some kind of monetary value other than just the intrinsic value. And of course, when I was doing some research for this talk, one of the policy ideas that I came up with was looking at what they're doing in Germany. They have a policy that states for each German city there's no net loss of urban green cover in each city. So if a place needs to be cleared for some urban development, well, the developer is required to put an equivalent amount or more back into a similar area nearby. And I think that's a really fundamental aspect of ensuring that we do achieve the kind of vision that we're going for. So As an environmentalist, I guess one of the important aspects of being passionate in this area is being concerned about, this nature deficit disorder. And a guy called Richard, who's an American author, he wrote a book called The Nature Principle, and he's coming out here to talk about connecting to nature. And he says that reconnecting to nature is one key to growing a larger environmental movement, and that reconnection is visceral and immediately useful to many people's lives. Encouraging personal reconnection does not mean less engagement with global environmental issues, it means more. And to act, most of us need motivation beyond despair. And if you listen to any biologist or scientist talk about the state of the environment, both globally and locally, you might think that with the loss of biodiversity and many other issues that are impacting on us at the moment, that we might throw our hands and give up. But certainly as an optimist, I think that we have an obligation to not just communicate with people about the importance of nature and green space for personal benefit, but also that we're connected to nature intrinsically and that we have a substantial role to play in doing that. So thanks for the opportunity to talk, and look forward to working with you in my capacity. Thank you.